we pause for a second or two. This is episode 168, Fables and Daydreaming. When we are in close proximity with something, or when we are even in the midst of something unfolding, it can prove difficult to keep track of what is going on. As we are standing in the middle, we must twist and turn in order to really gather all the information. It can prove very difficult, if not impossible, to sort of get a grasp of a situation we are in the midst of. When we are in close proximity with a difficult situation, or in the midst of a difficult situation, it can feel like we get bits and pieces of information, but that it's difficult to grasp the situation as a whole. It can feel like the situation is doing unto us rather than that we are doing unto the situation. Sometimes that actually is the case. Sometimes in life we simply are done unto. Sometimes the information is not ours to gather. Sometimes we will just be affected by life. Sometimes life just happens to us. And in those cases, it would prove futile to try to grasp the situation or trying to overstand the situation. Sometimes the situation simply has to do something unto us. Sometimes that is the case. Today's episode is called Fables and Daydreaming. And what we are talking about today is what we do when we find ourselves in such a difficult situation which seems to rather do unto us than us doing that much unto the situation. Today we're talking about how these two things, fables and daydreaming, can perhaps not always change our degree of control in situation, but at least grant us some acceptance and some understanding into that this is how it must be, and that this is how it is, and it might be quite okay. So, starting with fables. Fables are since many thousand years these sort of short stories in which the author sort of paints a picture of some animals or plants or some inanimate objects, or perhaps even some people in it. And in this picture, some turn of events is happening. And the conclusion of every fable is some sort of lesson learned, or some kind of point of acceptance that in this kind of situation, this is how it goes. This is how it is. And it's all right. In some sense, it is all right. Fables are often concerning those difficult situations to which we sort of cramp up and try to overstand the situation. The kind of situations we began today's episode referring to. So basically, the first part of what to do with today's episode is to develop some curiosity into reading fables. There are many, many difficult situations in life. And one slight difference in situation can completely change the dynamics and mystery of a situation. And that is why it is useful to read many different kinds of fables. They make us sort of notice dynamics to life that we might miss if we had not read any fables or even parables or stories or novels. That is the first part. The second part is daydreaming. So all of us are used to night dreaming in our sleep. We wake up in the morning and we have dreamt something. And it sort of happened with us without us doing anything. Daydreaming is different. Daydreaming is initiated by us voluntarily during the day. And at first, when we daydream, it feels awkward. We are bad at it. The sort of images we see in our mind's eye as we begin to daydream, the images are not that telling. They don't really say that much. Our images are sometimes misguided and sometimes just plain boring. They don't really say us that much. In the beginning it must be like that because we are not used to doing it. But as we go, as we daydream again and again, the images will in time become more and more defined. The images will in time, our daydreams will in time become more and more precise and accurate. As we read fables and stories and novels, parables, anything, fiction and even non-fiction, the more sort of we notice specific dynamics to life and actively think about the dynamics to our emotional and social lives, the more this sort of thinking and analyzing and contemplation will be able to work itself inside our daydreaming. What we are saying here is that in time, if we read fables, think about them, and from time to time daydream about images, so to speak, make our own fables in our mind's eye. In time, we will be able to, in the midst of a difficult situation, of our own, one of those situations that we could not really logically, deductively solve. When we find ourselves in such a situation, we can, instead of trying to solve the situation, we can just allow the situation to become a daydream. So, quite gently, but still confidently, we just allow ourselves to feel the situation we have at hand and just allow it to become images inside of us. Whatever images that just pops up spontaneously. So perhaps you have this difficult situation at work. You have a difficult situation in your personal life. There is something difficult about your just day-to-day life. It could be anything. You just sort of gently focus the difficulty that you feel, the sort of paradox or ambivalence or dilemma that you are experiencing. And then you just allow this energy, this sort of flavor to it, to become images in your imagination. And the images, in time, as you practice doing this, those images, those moving images, like a scene or a fable playing out itself in your mind, these sort of images will give you hints and clues as to what kind of bigger picture you are in. It will give you clues as to what kind of dynamics you are in at the moment. It will give you clues as to what kind of solution would be misguided. It would give you clues as to if there even is a solution, or if this situation is simply out of your control. This that we have talked about today, reading fables and practicing active daydreaming, this is part of our emotional skill, specific skill, proximity. It is a Polaroid called proximity. And basically proximity, specific skill, proximity, is about when we find ourselves in close proximity to, or in the midst of a situation that is just feels impossible and it's just wearing us down. That is what proximity is about, what we can and cannot do when we find ourselves in an unsolvable situation. Another thing we might do to help facilitate this skill is to write down the images that we daydream, and write them down as cleanly and as descriptively as we can, without trying to judge the images. Not try to comment on them with any values, any imposing values, just write down the images descriptively, as accurately as we can. Because the images are not truths in a hard sense. The images are clues, they are hints, they are guiding lights for us to not feel as lonely and left out in the midst of our situation. Often, when we find ourselves in such a unsolvable paradox or conundrum, then often the feeling of just feeling helpless is wearing us down and making us depressed, or making us lose confidence altogether. But making this sort of daydreaming and writing down the sort of images, it gives us some sense of agency. It gives us some sense of mystery and interest. It is interesting. So these difficult situations, they are often feeling quite bleak and flat, just draining. But once we transform them into these sort of creative images and then write them down, then we sort of take the raw material of this difficult situation and make something interesting out of it. We make something elevated out of it. And this sort of sense of almost like we're creating something. This creative it's a quite powerful feeling to be able to take something bleak and turn it into something interesting. It is a very life-affirming skill. It helps us see interesting things where we think there are not. And that is quite something. It helps us not feeling so worn out by our dilemmas. And it makes life more interesting. And it also takes some of the burden off of us, because then we find ourselves in this sort of interesting drama, this interesting mystery going on. And then we feel less exchangeable. We feel less hopeless. And that is something. It will still be a difficult situation. It might still not go as we want. Might still take a turn for the bad. But we have participated in a very full way. We have sort of given ourselves some degree of agency and some degree of recognition that we are actually participating, we're actually trying something here. We are not just left to chance. We're doing something with it. So might still not solve the problem, so to speak, but feel differently. Maybe not change anything in a strict sense, but grant us at least some acceptance or some understanding. Might not always feel enough, but sometimes it feels enough. Sometimes the acceptance or understanding is more important than actually solving the situation in a strict sense. That's it for today. Thank you.